Hello again. Hail to all of you who listen. I am just going to dive straight in today with chapter 6, which I now realize I have yet to name. So we'll just call it Upon the Seas. Seems like a good name to me. It was a strange place. All around Fitbjorn was a wide place of hard ground and light grey look. He didn't remark the sky or much of the distance, but he could the short bridge before him. It was made from some flimsy wood, and he stood at the end on one side. Before him he saw a whole host of coming foemen, and knew it was his place to fight them. He knew not what for he fought, but that it was important. He pushed forward on the flimsy bridge with his axe and tried to cut into a man. But as he swung, he became aware so strongly of all the wrongness. The blade was too small at the top of the axe, and when he swung, the haft bent and bowed with the force of his attack, and did no effect when it landed. He also saw around him that the bridge he stood on only really spanned a very shallow ditch, and that his standing here did nothing to quell the coming of the enemy who made for his own ally army behind. The enemy were far more than his own friend army, and when they reached them, they would destroy them. Everything was wrong. Few even cared as he stood there in defiant resistance. He flung his attack all about him, but could reach no one. It seemed that whenever he meant to focus on one man, he would become unattainable. And then he was not on the bridge, but still fighting, and still his axe would do nothing for his efforts. Suddenly he was in a different place. He was still surrounded by the swarming enemy, but they were not interested in his doing. He knelt down over a body and knew that it was Harold the king. This was his fated ambition. He wanted this moment, and it was all wrong. He held a knife in his hand and reached to cut the neck, but found, to his strange horror, that the whole body was roasted as over a flame. He tried to cut into the back of the neck, but it only fell away from the bones like well cooked cow flesh. Beyond this, the head of the king was so small and so charred that it was unrecognizable as having ever been human. He could tell, however, that the teeth were human. It was wrong. It was also wrong. The details about him were impossible to grasp unless they were the evidence of his total failures at every moment. Fitbjorn woke up, not in a violent spasm or a start. His eyes opened, and he yawned. What a terrible dream. He sat up and cracked his neck, then yawned again. Fitbjorn wiped water from his eyes and looked around the camp. Few others were awake yet. He stood from his cloak bedding and walked over to a fire that had a kettle over it and a man sitting by it. Good morrow, he said. Good morrow, friend. Would you care for some Miklagard tea? It's hot, the other asked. I would take some. It'll be hot out though soon enough. The man smiled. True that be, but the nights are always cool and the morning is always in want of warm drink. You speak with a skald's tongue. Were you among the storytellers last night? That is kind, but I was not. I am Luke. I am Fitbjorn. Luke handed him a cup. Then I know of thee. You were told of in the story last night. I too have seen you fighting before. It is a frightening thing when you fight. Fitbjorn nodded. It is. But I think it would be more frightening a thing not to fight when the battle was among my comrades. He drank the warm tea. It was strong for sure. That is a true warrior spirit you have. I'm sure you will be received in God's hall with love one day. His plan for you is not yet done, I think. Christian, Luke the Christian, He nodded. I follow my gods, and will arrive in the hall of the Aesir. But I think they have improved my luck some. Many a time have I felt some will keeping me strong in the times when I need it. They keep me alive for some purpose. God has a plan for us all. My fate was spun by the Norns on my birth. The three women know of it, not your God. It is not your old heathen ways, friend. God has a plan for us all. Your fate, as you call it, is but what God has ordained for you to learn. What plan he has will be carried out, and you will be his instrument. And then all those people that I killed in Sicily, or upon the Circland. You are a weapon then to kill his enemies. God chose you to kill the Circlanders. The men in Sicily, though, were Christian. I have killed many Christians. Why then? What plan was that? That was most likely some lesson for you to learn. God chose those men to die at your hand to teach you a lesson. Be thankful he cares so deeply for you. Lucky me. How many of his own devoted will he allow me to slaughter before I learned this lesson, one must wonder. I am so thankful he has chosen that I kill so many of the followers of Christ. Well, the man took a sip of tea. Fitbjorn did so as well. They continued to be locked in their eye contact. They are the most fortunate of all. They are with God in heaven now. You have sent them to the golden gate of heaven, their souls bought for with the blood of the Savior, the one true Lord of the world. They must be thanking you that they were sent to the Father from this wicked and sinful earth, not but pride and lust within these lands. Fitbjorn smiled. Pride and lust are what I am best at. I am one of the other. And the other for the first. So your fellow Christians that I hewed are with their father? Yes. And killing them teaches me? Luke nodded again. Good. Then I shall continue to hail Odin by slaying Christians. That is, after all, the plan. This last, he said. This last he said with some slight derision. He did not fully intend to, but could not help himself. Do what you will. Do you too? How many other Christians did you kill? Was that a lesson for you? Or were you aware at the moment of sending them to their God? You will reap the harvest of your transgressions on the day of judgment. Hell is what awaits you, eternal fool. Fitbjorn nodded. I guess there is no plan for me anymore. He shrugged. Of course there is a plan for you, the eternal torment of hell. Then why teach me lessons at all? The man's eyes widened some. It was not you that was meant to receive a lesson. It is I. You have been put in my way to show to me something. Your opinion about why I am here is as changeable as Loki, he said, shaking his head. Loki does not exist. Neither does your Odin or Thor. Quiet down, friend. You are going to wake them. Or perhaps you are here to protect me and the Christians still in the void with Harold. Fitbjorn's brow furrowed deeply at the mention of the man. At the price of the lives of many other Christians. The look on the man Luke's eyes had been growing more and more angry for some time now, and the heathen raider was thankful of the axe slung about a cloth loop on his back. He didn't know what this man would do, whether he'd have the foolishness to fight for his faith or the wisdom to slow his thoughts. You don't wear a cross, do you? That question took him completely by surprise. Of course not. Why should you ask if I do? You wear this strange hammer. Fitbjorn looked down at the tunic he wore and realized that the hammer was not outside. He hooked his thumb around the chain and pulled it slowly forth, finally pulling out the hammer. This is Mjolnir, hammer of the Thunderer. an amulet for strength and power. I wear the symbol of the most strong of the gods. And I wear the symbol of my god. The place where he died. The place where he became the Lamb. The place where he cleansed all the world for their sins. This is the place where Christ the man died and resumed his nature as God Almighty. Do not blaspheme. He nearly stood in his passion. By his sacrifice, we are all saved. We need only to kneel and accept his grace into our lives. My gods do not ask that I kneel. They never ask such things. That is why we do not kneel to any king. I work not to earn my god's protection. I protect myself and only work to impress my gods. That is what my life is. Long shall I tell of my tales at the feast. And killing Christians is impressing to them. The man put a hand on his sword. Not often. Theirs is a dead god. They have little to fight for. Excuse me. Then let us, you and I, have a holmgang and see which god chooses the victor the better. Fitzbjorn took a deep breath in through his nose. He took a sip of tea. No, I do not kill those beside me, nor those behind me. I kill only those in front of me. You and I, Varangian, we disagree, but I am not so ready to cast my fellows down. We will not find out which god is stronger by our fight. I allow no peace for my foe, but I will always allow no hatred for my kin. The man looked at him confused, but took his hand from his sword. I am not your king. Kin, I do not know who you are. I know not even your real name. But you and I fight in the same shield wall. We have allegiance to the same lord and feast together after a battle. Battle kin is something my father taught me to respect. Always, brother. The man's expression changed from confused to moved. I think, my God, I was right. You were put into my path to teach to me a lesson. He finished his tea. That is a godly way of living life. Even if you will not admit it, you act by the grace my God bestowed you. Perhaps even you are here to protect me more than I realized. Now you admit it. However you convince yourself of it, brother, I will not hate you for your way. I will only continue to live in mine. The likeness of Hugo can take many forms. Love for your battlekin is among those things that a man must live out in this world. The man's shoulders lowered and he breathed in deeply. They both looked out over the water in a vast middle sea. The sun rose on their left and lit the whole sky and the few scattered clouds. I like this island, Luke said. Fitzbjorn laughed. It has been good to us. God has been good to us. Yes, they have. When all the Varangian were awake and had eaten, they gathered themselves to packing what was left to be packed onto the ships, and everyone ready to shove off from the shore. The ships had been run aground at low tide, and in the morning, as the high tide came, the ships were ready to fly again. They rowed out to deeper waters and turned their prow to the east. A song started being sung from the whole army of the sailing Varangian. The sails were raised and the winds pushed their way. The ships were all laid low with plunder and pillage and the laughter and good spirit. It was a good haul. My hoard grows richer with every passing day, Harold said to the men as they caught the wind, and each oar was again within the boat. God has blessed our voyage at each step. I cannot wait to tell the Emperor of my death. All the Varangian laughed, but one. Behind them, the island of Sicily smoked in the ruin they left there. Burning castles and shattered villages, wealth taken and moved to the east to bolster the empire. I think we're going to Miklagard, Hafald said, excited. Twice by 40 seasons it has been, Neil said. What? Asked Ragnar, turning back to them. It is near so many. 80 seasons. You've taken leave of your senses there, laddie. You've not heard us say this before, Bodil asked. It's something that is said in our north home. Twice by 40 just means many, many. It does not really mean 80. I would say that in this army and among these 4 warships, we have twice by 40 raiders. That is just the way to talk, Inga agreed. She leaned onto Hafald's shoulder. You heathens, you've so many ways about you that are just alien. You ken that. Can you try again to say that heart that stands atop the hall? I think I'd like a laugh. Bodil said. Erktherner. That's it, isn't it? Bodil nodded along, impressed. Well, Eiktherner, but you were damned close. I'm damned nothing, Ragnar countered. Can you say the Isle of my birth then? And to Eilen Scythianach? Fitbjorn said. Ragnar nearly stood. That was perfect, laddie! By God, you've got a tongue for a Scots! A warrior's first weapon is his mind, he said. They all looked at Fitbjorn. Some great change has happened in you, friend, Niels said. I like it. You speak in newfound poetry. You have some inspiration. Wait, was that not a quote? Asked Hafald. No one I've heard before, not even in the Bible. Bodil rolled her eyes. Is everything Bible and charity to you? Is everything gluttony and eating for ye? Watch yourself. I'll have to gobble you up if you don't keep that tongue in check. You wish, Ragnar said with a shrug, to which Bodil laughed. I am a bride fit for Thor himself, she said with her chin raised up. No mortal man, I think, could handle my body. Thank God you don't want me to try. You wish, she said back at him, and he laughed. Hafald looked up then. He smelled the air. What is it, sweet one? Asked Inga. He blew out his nose into the sea and smelled the air again. Something is on the horizon. They all looked behind them at the prow and beyond. There was some orange haze in the far distance, but nothing nefarious looking. What have you the eyes of Heimdallr? Asked Inga. I think I do. That is the tempest. They looked again, the haze now seeming a dark, brooding entity with the renewed insight. Should we tell someone? Asked Niels, looking nervous. The storm watchers will already know. Be ready to tie down and make safe, you things, Hafald said. Perhaps the beating of Thor's mighty hammer will grace us this coming hour. Why are you always so excited by storms? Inga said. They are the power of the gods in Midgard, he replied. And Thor is the protector of Midgard, Bodil said. Only the strong survive. Sounds like we'll have to row, Ragnar said, taking his coat from his seat beneath him and putting it on. I never asked, but I meant to. Where did you get that? Inga said. This is seal skin. It is from my home, the Isle. There are many seals there. Don't exactly have a story about it like the White Cloak. At least you don't call yourself Grey Seal, Niels said with his smile. My name, I'll tell you when I'm ready, finally, when my destiny comes. Pray that's not in the coming hour, 'cause I can see the storm gathering, Hafald said with hungry eyes. Come and bring me home, you Bryn of the gods. Brynulf, Niels said. That would be a good name for you. Hafald Brynulf. Hafald looked from the horizon to Niels. Storm Hunter. His eyes turned back to the distance. That is a good name, I think. He nodded. Hafald Brynulf. Storm Hunter. Storm! Shouted the steerboard wielder. Get ready the goods, Harold commanded. Our way to Miklagard is breached by a gale. Let us not be hindered, but blown to our port. Hail! the crew yelled to him. They then all jumped to their work. The boxes and sacks were checked for their strength of their ties. The birds in their cages were covered with canvas. The storm is moving fast, Ragnar said. He sat and watched the coming winds. Brynulf, would you lend a hand and not sit there with an erection for the storm? Niels asked. Ragnar laughed at that. Bodil, let's have the rest of that fowl you've got. She smiled, shaking her head. I was going to save that for tomorrow at least, but the waters will ruin it anyway. She took the bundle from beneath her seat. I hate soggy bird. What kind of bird is it? Asked Hafald. She smirked at him. Roasted. You know I bring the feasting. Bodil tore into the bird. She tore it into 5 pieces and handed them each to her friends. This is not so insignificant a piece of game. Where did you find this? Niels asked, taking a bite. I traded for it. She grunted while wolfing down the food. Tell me you didn't trade anything useful. Nothing like that, Inga. Only silver. Do you still have any of that wine? Inga nodded. Here, have a drink. She handed over a jug and Bodil drank from it directly. I meant for you to pour some into a cup, you idiot. Shut up. I gave you foreign chicken. This is really good. She drank again from the jug. Give that here before you have it all done, Fitbjorn said, and Bodil handed it to him. He glanced over at Inga and drank from it directly as well. Oh, for Freya's sake, why do that? She tore into her own piece of the bird and then motioned for him to pass the jug. Those Sicilians make excellent wine. How much do you think we took from that island? I was not counting the jugs of wine, but the foeman I slew, Hafvald said. She grinned at him. And I'm counting the passing of time in lovemaking, Inga replied, kissing Hafvald. I very much enjoyed the stories I learned upon Sicily. What have you, no-named raider? What did you count the time with? Niels asked with more than a slight amount of jest. Glory yearned for another's name. Niels laughed. If you dwell too much on such things, it will surely be your death. Not until the changing of kings, a time upheaval in the world. Then is my fate death fated. Bodil smiled at him. So certain, so serious. Was it the Valva who told to you this fate? Can she have known the threats of the Norns? The raider looked at her. Do you know what I suspect? He leaned forward conspiratorially. That I think all women partake in this galder. That you are all Volvir, at least in some small way. Bodil slowly drew a bone from her mouth, staring at Fitbjorn. Shall I cast the bones for your future? What truth would you know of me, Rekker? He sniffed. That is not funny. White Bear here is not playing games with you now, Niels said. Bodil threw the bone into the ocean. Oh, it looks like your fate is to fall to the storm. Oh, poor Nameless. She made a pouty face, her ample cheeks making this a funny gesture. Then it will also mean the changing of kings, Fitbjorn said rather loud. The sea will not take me. She hasn't the stomach for me. Calm yourself, Bodil said, taking out another small wrap of burlap. She opened it and bit some of the contents out and ate it with the bird. What have you there? Asked Ragnar. This, she said, then spitting something to the side, is honeycomb. Some honey with my alien chicken. It is delicious. No, 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 Ragnar countered. Honey and chicken do not go together like that. He turned from her. But I thought your kind was never fond of envy. They all laughed together at Ragnar until he joined in with them. To the oars! Out the oars! Harold called, and they stopped their jest. They threw the bones of the bird into the sea and readied their work. Fitbjorn took his half cloak from under from his shoulders and tied it with the great one under his seat. He kept his axe upon him, though. He and Niels, once done with the securing, took the oar from the center and put it into the water. Inga and Hafald did the same with their oar, and Ragnar and the Bodil did so with as well. Ready! They shouted. All around the long ship, the sailing Varangian called their preparedness. Good! Harold shouted back. Heave! They all pulled upon their oars and readied themselves mentally for the storm. They would have to row for hours yet to keep the speed necessary not to be thrown to death by the waves. They pulled as if their lives depended on it. They were sailing Varangian. They were not unaccustomed to storms. The life at sea necessitated that sometime they be battered at by wind and wave. Every storm on the sea was violent, almost hatefully so. But at least the storms here were warmer. Many of these Varangian were northerners, who knew well the lashing of cold rain in the sea storms. The rains here were not so freezing, but they were as well as strong. Many had experienced the sheer madness of sailing through a storm and prepared themselves now for the wilderness of doing so again. Heave! Heave those oars! We have weeks yet to win home to our port in Miklagard. Get thee to the oar, and all together, heave! All together, and with the fervor of those who wanted to live, they pulled as one. One army, one oar, one heart, one ship. The winds whipped the sail then. It fluttered as only storm winds would make for, and from that first gust the wind kept on them. They pulled the oars together with much strength as they could, for anything less could be well-mean death. The dark haze of the storm slowly encroached over them. At first, it was only the wind whose evidence made for strong pulling of the sail and their hair. However, any who looked to the water saw the strange skittering white foam that strong winds produced. The sea around them, though not yet the turbulent roils of the waves, was still boiling in anticipation of the coming fury. I always thought it was supposed to be calm before a storm, Inga said, rowing and looking at the rising wave line. This is not calm. Hafald laughed beside her as he heaved the oar, doing most of the work for sheer love of it. We have had too much calm on this water as it is. This is a welcome change to the way it was. Now here we have the power of the gods to drive us. Yes, Thor and his mighty thunder shall crash about me. I am sure he is calling for me to join him, Bodil said with a laugh. Then why not leap over to the side, Bodil, and rid me of your stench? Asked Ragnar. Ha! There is still too much I have to do in this life, though I think it clear that Thor awaits my arrival with great anticipation. There is the whole of Midgard to explore, exotic lands to pillage, and foreign feasts to partake in. Oh, just heave, Fitbjorn said. Do not waste your strength in talking, as we have so mighty a task before us. Perhaps this is a test of the gods. Odin has set for our path a challenge that we might impress him. Our way is the royal and the violence of a storm? Good! Watch us well, Allfather. See my glory. The others laughed openly with him at this, the wild energy of the storm winds and rain burning in them all. Suddenly, the storm does not seem so large, White Bear. Not next to your pride, Ragnar shouted over the rising gusts. Harder and harder they had to pull as the waves grew to nearly breaking. They, each of them, knew that the Commander Harold would be keeping a stern eye on their rowing. The rowing in a storm provided two functions. Firstly, the speed they would need to keep the pace with the wind and thus not be thrown about, which should be handled by the sail. But for the second reason, that needed their pace to match the wind, lest the strength wear the sail too much. The sail of a longship was the most expensive piece. The sail was made with care and precision, following hundreds of years of well kept tradition to inform design and integrity. The sail was the heart and the skin of the ship. If it failed, there was little that could be done in such a gale. These Varangian were all master sailors. They each of them knew well the operation of every facet and position of the longship. They were also ready to meet any place that needed their attention if a comrade fell to battle or to sickness or to a storm. The storm could not but help in that moment to remember the dream. Excuse me. The storm started to rage around them. There came from the sea a splash of stirred water, and immediately thereafter, the rain started to pound from the sky. It felt like tiny grains of sand slapping them with its force. Fitbjorn could not help but, in that moment, to remember the dream as one so small against the enormity of the worlds and all their power. He was but a mortal creature here. He remembered his axe bending as a reed would bend, making no effect at all. His vengeance realized to mean nothing. The body of his enemy already roasted, the stance he made meaning nothing as his foe swarmed past him, not caring for his resistance of their advance. He rode through the enormous sense of failure, he remembered. He had watched all around him as his efforts and strength meant for absolutely nothing. Still, he rode, his breath showing some of the wild exasperation he felt. He wanted to roar, to fight against the tempest within him that tried to take his power. No, he growled, pulling the harder. Never shall my efforts be for nothing. I am the proud warrior son of the gods. They stand tall behind me and watch with satisfaction at my striving in this life. He said so loudly, but none heard him, the invocation lost in the whipping winds and the driving rains. Heave, you all! Harold shouted. This wind tries to tear at us. Heave and make peace with God. We pray that this night will win out our success to distant shores. Heave! All the Varangians shouted as one in the powerful wind. Heave! Each shout met with a pull of the oars. The storm raged around the long ships for hours, and they worked diligently and tirelessly through it all. Harold the entire time at the aft, having taken the steer board for himself and making the image of a strong and noble leader. He stared and commanded from his position without wavering a moment. To many, he was an inspiration of defiance against great odds. To one, he was the embodiment of the great odd that deserved defiance. Gods! Harold whispered to himself, seeing the enormous moment before him. Look there! Each of you look! There is our doom! Our very death come to greet us before our time! Look! He shouted, pointing to the front of the ship. Each Varangian took an opportunity to look back and past the prow at what it was he showed them, but they knew what they would see. There, ahead of them, was a wave as tall as the grandest temple and church in Miklagard. The great swell of the sea risen up to scrape the sky. Heave! They all shouted as the long ship dipped and started to climb the side of the mighty surf. They rowed, even as they looked down the long slope of the wave behind them. They climbed for an age, rowing together into the sky. They finally crested the great beast, and for a moment, the dragon ship of Harold Sigurdsson stood at the summit of a giant, a sea monster their dragon had bested. They stayed there a moment, and every sailing Varangian let slack their effort at the oars and looked about, for they each of them sat in the sky. Then the momentum carried them to the other side, and they sailed down with great speed. Hold the oars back! Harold shouted. They knew well that the great speed could grab the oar and dislodge someone, throwing them into the sea. When again they reached the bottom of the wave's edge, he brought his hand down. Oars back into the water! Heave! And thus again, they battled the storm. End of chapter 6. I really liked that chapter. As I like all the chapters, I'm just that kind of full of myself sort of guy. But this is an interesting and true fun fact. That dream that Fitbjorn had at the beginning of standing on the very bridge and having only but a shallow ditch around him. So all the enemies were swarming around anime. So his defiance there, meaning nothing, and the axe bending in his efforts, and then a smaller axe hit on top, like too small. And then the body of someone under him that had been roasted into like well cooked meat. That dream happened to me while I was writing this book. In all the preparation that I did for it, I read a lot about Harold Sigurdsson's saga and everything. And I had that dream almost verbatim, like word for word, like everything that's described is exactly what I had in my dream. I woke up and the clinging wisps of the dream were still grabbing onto the constraints of my brain, and I had to shake myself from it. And I sat up in just total strange shock and awe, obviously knowing that it was a result of all my studies and the things that I had learned and the things that I was planning for this book. But for those of you who know, again, very somewhat prophetic. So I decided to give it to our main character, our hero Fitbjorn, the unnamed raider, the black hair, who has an axe made from two spearheads taken from the body of a great white bear, and whose haft was made of a branter of Yggdrasil. And this chapter is also meant really to drive further home the character of Hafald, now called the Brynulf. The Brynwolf. Bryn means storm. Ulf or wolf means hunter. Those of you who might already know this might be interested to know that Beowulf means bee hunter. Beo is bee, wolf, hunter. So Beowulf, bee hunter, refers to bear. Of course, another word for bear in the old world language was bjorn, which is why it's Fitbjorn, white bear. I didn't name my character Beowulf, if that's what you're asking, but they do have similar-ish names if you dig down through the etymology. And I love the attitude of the Brynulf, that excitement for a storm, because that rage, that fury, that lashing, that is life. And one of the ways that I really like to describe myself, and one that I have been using recently, is that I feel like I am a hungry ghost come back to this world to haunt all these people who are only pretending to be alive. So that is today's lesson, I guess. Be excited to be here. You're here. You can do with here and now many things. Do them greatly. Be wonderful. Be wonderful. And live passionately. For the storm is coming, and you won't survive every one. Be great. Whew. I'm going to need to calm myself down tonight. And I don't think I'm going to succeed. In fact, I need not to.